In fact, I've had to go through this twice, where unexpected tragedy, loss, pain, and yeah, of course, it's an awful place to be. And in fact, being sucked into darkness forever is one tough thing, but then to go silent as well, it's like being trapped in your body. And it was very lonely. It was very frustrating. And it's kind of funny during the whole COVID quarantine time, whenever I was complaining about being locked at their houses, I'm thinking, not so bad. I'm okay. But but I love how Elrod talks about it in. I think he mentions it in his The Morning Miracle, which was a great book. But he talks about it all the time. But he went through a personal tragedy of his own, and he gave himself a time limit to grieve. And once they decided he was going to say whatever, it was 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 5 minutes. And after that, he was going to stop grieving and stop complaining. And he was just going to get active, get busy on something else.
Mm,
And I love how he puts it because once you make the decision that once your time limit is up, and you're going to get busy doing something else, well, you don't actually need all that time. He didn't need five.
mm,
He didn't need 5 seconds, and it's the same for me. I was, not a very happy guy and not very pleasant to be around when I came back from the hospital, having gone first blind, and when you go 100% blind, you get the added benefit, added bonus gift of a sleep disorder
mm,
that comes with not being able to wind your internal clock called the circadian rhythm, uh, because your internal clock is set by sunlight, and when you go deaf, well, when I went deaf, I also had the bonus gift with that too, which was a loss of my vestibular balance, the inner ear gyro. So I came home uh, blind, sleep disorder, deaf, and I couldn't even get on my treadmill since I'd been running for the last few years before the meningitis. And so when I came home, I was almost falling off the toilet. Type of bad balance. So I'm sitting there on my breakfast counter, my the bar in my kitchen, trying to think of, just talking to myself, that the awful self-talk about, you can't do this, and why is this happening to me again, and when have I paid my dues, all of that, and it's all these questions, they have no answers. They lead you to nowhere, and just basically a downward spiral of depression. So once I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere with that kind of thinking, I decided that I was just going to look towards, well, what can I do? And why is this happening for me versus why is this happening to me? And I'd been doing this for a few years with the blindness, and I'd learned that the best way to learn something is to teach, and I was teaching others how to get through this, trauma in their life, and so basically I decided that if I was gonna learn how to do it again, I might as well pay attention so I can teach. And so it went from uh, why is this happening to me to why is this happening for me? And then why is this happening for me so I can teach others?
man. And what would you say to somebody who maybe is going through something? I don't know if I should say similar, but their own version of whatever feels insurmountable to them. Is there advice that you? I mean, yeah. I guess is there any advice that you would offer?
Absolutely. For one, we're rarely, I don't think we're ever given anything that we can't actually deal with. Until we're dead, we can keep fighting and pushing forward. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a positive outlook. Have faith in a good outcome. Yeah, and surround yourself with strong people that can help you when you're at your weakest. Thankfully for me, I have incredible circles, from my family to my military brothers and sisters to these masterminds, and I talk. And of course, not every one of my days are happen with a sunrise and bright, sunny, heavy day. I've got bad days. I've got tough days, but it's my support system that helps keep me moving forward.
Amazing. And this is, I know it's a real estate show, so I want to hear about your deals that you've been working on since we last spoke. But I know in your spare time, since between doing deals and raising kids, you trained for the Badwater 135 and completed it as the first and only fully deaf and blind person to complete this ultra marathon, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about from David Goggins. He kind of made it more famous, I think, and talks about how grueling the race is. So the question comes up for me, because I want to hear about this experience of doing this over the last year, but what drives a person to subject themselves to this kind of torture?
Well, it's they say a marathon, 26.2 miles. After 20 miles, you're halfway there. and, and what they're getting at is that you got to get past the physical part to get to the mental struggle. And there's something about ultra marathons. It's like climbing mountains or anything that's a hard endeavor, is that there's some you grow stronger from it. And it's not just the physical part, but it's a mental strength. And to subject ourselves to these challenges makes us stronger. So doing something like Badwater, it was about getting past the physical side to that mental part, and running for 42 hours and change straight across Death Valley and over 3 mountain ridges. There's a lot of self-talk, and there's a lot of that. I talk about all the time, where that voice in the back of your head that says, the voice of fear and doubt, that tells us we're not strong enough, we're not smart enough, we haven't prepared enough for this, or who am I to think that I could do this? It's just too much. So we should probably quit. And we rationalize, right? How many times the thought has passed through my mind is that if I just rolled my ankle, nobody would say otherwise. Nobody would question. I say I rolled my ankle, and I can't move forward anymore. But nobody else would know except me. I would know. So on that road in California, running across Death Valley, when that voice came to me and said, "You're not good enough. This is too hard. You don't have it, and it's time to quit." That's when I just smile and I say, I've been waiting for you. I've been expecting this.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think a lot of people just think about what it takes to do 135 miles. I can't even imagine running for 40 hours straight. But that's just part of it. I mean, the training that goes into. I kind of followed your some of your training, through some of your posts on Facebook. But can you share a little bit about what the typical training looks like for to prepare yourself for something like this?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of it was, I live in Florida, in the Panhandle, and it gets warm here. So that was part of it. It's not just putting the miles in, but it was also heat training. And I consider getting a sauna, but just leaving my garage door shut and running in the treadmill in my garage with that sun radiating through the tin door, yeah, it was good enough. And plus, with humidity at 5,000%, and my coach knew how to make things extra miserable for me because I have two speeds: run and stroll, meander. And she said, you need to do so many miles at a high incline on your treadmill in this hot garage with a weight vest, power walking.
Mm,
And I said, I hate power walking. And so it's the right kind of training, both physically and mentally. So uh, I had that while I'm sweating and paying attention to my nutrition, and I was becoming physically resilient. I also had that voice in my head all the time going, "This sucks."
yeah.
Maybe you should just tell your coach you did it, and then we'll go inside to the air conditioning. Yeah, so it's a physical and a mental resilience. Uh, and that's how we prepare for the hard times, whether they're uh, a surprise or they're intentional. Tacome is, we get up in the morning before the kids. Yeah, I got up at 4:30 or so, and I put some miles in, and then I would wait until mid-afternoon before the kids came back from school and daycare, and I'd go back out there when it was really nice and hot, and I'd do the rest of my training. So I often do 2 a days. Um, that's how I prepare, because I know at 2 in the afternoon half the battle's just getting in, going into that garage.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I remember one of your posts that you were talking about that where you got up early in the morning, got 5-10 miles in, and then got your kids ready for school, got them off to school. Then you obviously have work stuff still and your real estate investments to manage. Then you're running. In this particular one, I think you ran all afternoon, then had dinner with the family, then got back on the treadmill at night after the kids went to bed. It just sounded like, I don't know how a person does that, let alone without the use of sight or sound or having hearing. It just, it's incredible. And it kind of brought up a question for me, because you hear about so many people who are successful, like David Goggins, for example, like, super intense guys accomplish so much, but it seems like a lot of these guys, it's at the expense of their family, and their relationships. And that seems like those two can a lot of times contradict each other. Success and having a good family. But you've seems like you've struck a balance, and you're able to kind of balance those two things. So how is it that you think about that, or how do you balance all the achievement that you've had, even being blind and deaf, and then also maintaining a good relationship with your family at the same time?
Huh. For one, I don't think that balance isn't isn't a stationary thing. We're constantly balancing. Sometimes we've got to make adjustments back and forth. It's like, leaning back, the back two legs of a chair and trying to keep it up. Constantly working to make sure that we don't fall one way or the other. So it's not balance; it's balancing. And sometimes we've got to give a little more attention to one thing or another. I try to uh, keep it so everything gets as much as attention as possibly can. But my wife and my kids do know that if I take on one of these big challenges like Badwater, that I'm gonna need to put a little extra attention to my training. So maybe we get an extra takeout meal a week, or maybe Dad's cuisine isn't doesn't have as much focus, on it. Not usually like my usual efforts. When it comes to the businesses, that's what having actually everything in life. It's what having a strong team around you. So you shouldn't have to do everything. Uh, when it comes to real estate, my wife is an incredible project manager. She is also the one that runs the channel manager and does the customer relations. So I mean, she's doing a fantastic job, and it's all around. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people so that you can focus in on your strengths, and other people can and help you know lift up your weaknesses.
Great advice. Great advice. And also, since we last spoke, you started your podcast, Point of Impact, which is an awesome podcast. If others, if people are listening to this, you should check that out as well. But I'm curious what inspired you to start that podcast, and I guess how you decide on these challenges, because you are doing so much more than a lot of people with all five senses, and so I'd love to hear just like I guess what the inspiration was and how you decide on something like this.
Blind deaf guy with a podcast. I was looking for another challenge. Uh, like it was a number of reasons. One, it was of course the number one reason is that I can reach a bigger audience with some of the messages that I've learned, some of the lessons I've learned along the way. And it was a way to not just have a podium to speak from, but then I can also bring experts in all different types of areas, learn from them at the same time I'm sharing it with everybody else. So it's an incredible way to network, to learn, to share. And all I have to do is turn my microphone on, click record, and of course find the guests. But again, I I don't do the technical side as far as editing and publishing and all that because it would take me forever. I have accessibility software and text to speech and software and all that, so I can probably figure it out in a few years. But it took me a while to realize, once again, to learn the same lesson I've learned over and over again, is that uh, you know I don't need to do everything myself. So I find people who can do it, and we find a common vision of the future, what we want to accomplish, and we do it together.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so many people would be better off, so much better off if they took that approach instead of I know personally I always am like, oh, how can I accomplish this or do this instead of thinking through the lens initially of okay, who can I work with to accomplish this together? And I think that's such a smart approach that you have. Um, not to totally switch gears, but I think it goes along with that. So I want to hear about your real estate ventures, and what you've been up to since we last talked. And maybe you can share a little bit about how you initially got into real estate, what you were doing initially, and then we can talk about some of the deals that you've worked on over the last year.
Well, we started the fudge business back in 2015, 2016, and excuse me. Oh, after starting the fudge business, it actually had some success. And in fact, a few years later, we were invited onto the Rachel Ray show, and it just surprisingly took off. So we wanted to start taking this active income and start looking passively. We looked into real estate, and of course, we from all the different methods we could choose from to invest in real estate. Uh, we picked something that wasn't very passive to start with. In fact, our very first project was out of state burr uh, purchased from an online auction with hard money. Actually, the most active thing I could possibly think of, and the most difficult first project, for a new real estate investor they could possibly come up with. And it went just like you might think. It was chaos and a disaster. Well, it wasn't a disaster. We had a few things going for us. One, I invested out of state, but in my hometown, a place I knew, and I've got family there. My mom and my brother had already done a few flips, so they were already in the business and they knew. And so they were the boots on the ground. And we have a great contractor there who's just a magician, because this house also was it was nearly a century home, and every time we peeled back another layer, there was another layer of something we needed to fix. I think I think it was a 1930s house. It I think the 1950s wallpaper was holding the roof up. Uh, this was 2019, and another thing going for us was the market. So, uh, when all was said and done, we were able to do a cash out refinance. It turned out pretty terrific after the rehab budget ballooned to double what we
Oh,
originally expected. And it's an auction. We didn't know exactly what was under the surface, and what we found was more rehab.
yeah, yeah.
But we were able to refinance it for more than we'd originally estimated, and we were able to rent it long term for more than we'd originally estimated there also. And then that turned into a couple more rehab projects. We started doing the burr stir, burr into short-term rental, and that's become our methodology now, and it's turned out to be pretty fantastic. We've got a couple rental properties, a couple short-term rentals in Akron, Ohio, and we've got a couple projects going on in Florida near in our backyard now.
Nice. And how is it that you identify one of these bird to short-term rentals? What's the main criteria you're looking at?
We're looking for similar to what you espouse in living off rentals, is uh, not the mountaintop cabins and not the beachside mega mansions, but a little bit off the beaten path, maybe secondary towns near points of interest, but something with enough travelers to keep the occupancy up. So our properties in Ohio were generally around $100,000 to purchase.
Wow.
Had enough updating necessary to force appreciation, so we could refinance out, and then there was enough, traffic, transient population there to keep it occupied. And Akron, Ohio is fantastic because it's got three major hospitals. There are campuses or satellite campuses of 12 universities. It's the still the headquarters. It used to be the rubber capital of the world because that's where Firestone, BF Goodrich, all those major manufacturers were right in Akron. The tire manufacturing itself is moved out, but the headquarters and their like research and development, like Dow Chemical, and all of that are still right there. So there's from all of that, there's plenty of people coming and going, and we keep our rentals full.